Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, hello. How are we all?
Good, thank you.
Good. Good. I've only got about 5 or 6 faces, so I don't know how many we are. But welcome to everybody, and thank you for asking me to. Hello, another face there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for asking me to host this for you. I hope that I am able to cover the things that you wanted some clarification on. I'm the host now. Ooh, power. If I don't, or if I go, off on one, or you're not understanding anything, please just rein me back in and ask for a bit more clarification. And then, of course, when it comes to it at the end, if there's bits that I haven't covered, or if there's bits that you'd like some clarification on, please, ask your questions, and I will endeavour to answer them. And if I can't answer them, then I will try to, go away and find an answer for you. So, Aisha, I think I saw you flip a page. Does that mean you got through that handout that I sent?
I didn't get to print it because my printer's not working, but I've just got a notebook so I can jot down some stuff.
Apologies. Sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry. Okay. No,
I didn't get a handout, just so you know, but I can follow as you go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get a handout.
You did. Okay, so, well, not to worry. I tell you what, it's available. Jess, you've got them, haven't you? You've had.
Yes. So it's attached to the email that I sent out with the information about how to join the webinar. So it's just a Word document attached to the email that you would have received.
Thanks for the effort. I probably just didn't look at it. Thank you.
That's all right.
No, don't worry. Honestly, it's the reason I do anything like that whenever I do any of these sorts of things is I often find myself that when I'm listening to something, I can take it in and it sounds great in the moment. She says, sounding like I'm going to sound great in the moment. And then I go away and I think, do you know what? I can't actually remember what all was said. I know it sounded worthwhile, but I can't necessarily remember. So I find it really helpful to have something written down as a point of reference to go back to. So that's why I kind of wrote it all out, so that if it feels like a lot of information in the moment, you can go back to it and look it up and go, oh, okay, I get that. So that's why that's there. So I was just going to kind of work through that actually to expand on that a bit more fully. So I was going to start with this concept of what are we talking about when we talk about mental health, mental well-being, and essentially what we mean when we talk about mental health, mental well-being is not just a status quo of things are okay. Technically, within the definitions of mental health, mental well-being is about, particularly mental well-being, it's more than just being okay. It's actually it's not just surviving, it's thriving. There's that concept of being better than okay. So, how many of us right now feel we're in that place where we've got good well-being? Not very many of us, I'm going to suggest. We are all, I think, just getting by, right? I'm going to offer that one out. I know certainly I feel like that most of the time right now, that I'm definitely not progressing. I wouldn't say my mental health is bad or my mental well-being is bad, but I'm not thriving. I'm maintaining. And I think one of the things that it's really important to hold on to in these sorts of circumstances, not that we've known this sort of circumstance in the past, but any situation where things are tricky, is what are we talking about when we talk about thriving? Okay, what are we talking about when we talk about normal? And so much of what life is today is not normal. Therefore, I think we have to be open to the idea that concept of thriving is actually something quite different to what it would be under normal circumstances. So we are in many ways thriving, because rather than the benchmark being here and we're thriving by going here, normal is down here. So if we're getting to the benchmark here, we're thriving. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because normal is so abnormal, just getting to normal is thriving, is well-being. So I would suggest, and this is what I'm saying to anybody who asks me, that, you know, at the moment, to have good days and bad days is normal, actually. To feel not great, to feel that life is hard work, that staying positive is a struggle, is more of a struggle than normal, is normal. Because we're trying to get our well-being to what would be normal rather than beyond normal, to that position of feeling thriving. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
How would you thrive in the pandemic though? Because like everyone's like losing their jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
So how would you possibly be thriving if the whole world's stopped, in a way?
So when you say how would you possibly, how can we, it's what you're saying, sorry, I don't know who's saying that, so apologies. But
It's Amy. So like,
Yeah.
so for me, it's like I'm having difficulty at work at the moment. So I'm about to like lose my job because of the pandemic and stuff, and just poor performance as it is due to my dyspraxia. But anyways, like, how would you thrive? Like it says, you've said mental well-being is not just about surviving but thriving, but how would you remain positive during these tough times?
Well, I think that's my point, Amy, is that staying positive isn't necessarily what we're aiming at, but staying, so positive has a sense of being beyond okay. Positive to me has a sense of being beyond okay. Do you know what I mean? That we're actively happy as opposed to actively just okay. So I think that's what I mean by that concept of us thriving in these sort of circumstances, is getting to a place where we are actually, I suppose, rather than okay, coping might be a better word to use. Does that make sense? So if you are actually getting through the day, and you are getting through a day with highs and lows, then in terms of well-being, actually, you're doing okay, because the normal is so abnormal that we have to redefine what we mean by well-being, and I think what we mean by well-being in these circumstances is getting through the day, coping with good days and bad days, with the responding to the stresses that we have in life, and sometimes finding that difficult. That is well-being. Does that make sense, Amy, or not?
Yeah, that's fine.
Does it help or not?
Yeah.
I think my point is, what I'm trying to say is, and I hear entirely what you're saying about people are losing their jobs. There's a lot of sadness. So I think there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of frustration, anxiety, worry, all of these quite negative feelings. So I think for me, to have good, to feel well, mentally well at the moment, is to feel those feelings and to be able to get through to the end of the day, notwithstanding those tricky feelings. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I hope that has helped, and that makes sense. So just moving then on to the actual science of well-being, okay, because hopefully that this helps us get to that point of well-being, get to that point of coping, of being okay. So as I said in my document, we think about the brain as split into two. It's very rudimentary. I'm not a neuroscientist, but let's think about our brain as being split into two. Now, I don't know if I've got a mirror image here for you, but this is my right. Are you seeing that as my right or my left?
Left.
Left.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I'll try and remember to do it the other way around. So we've got our right-hand brain. Okay, now our right-hand brain is, I'm going to write R on my hand so that I know. So my right-hand brain is where I feel things, okay? My left-hand brain is where my logic sits, okay? We have a lack of well-being, or we struggle with our mental health, mental well-being, when our right-hand brain feels a lot, okay? And our left-hand brain isn't able to sort of negotiate and balance those feelings, okay? So what normally happens is the right-hand brain goes, and then the neurons from the left-hand brain come rushing in and sort of temper those emotions. Just like, think about the right hand brain being a little child, okay? A little toddler having a bit of a specky in the supermarket, and along comes mum, dad, whomever, grandma, and sort of brings that, hey, it's okay, you've fallen over, it's okay, let's give it a kiss and a cuddle, and we'll go and have a nice ice cream, you'll be fine, it's okay, you just tripped up, bringing some logic, some understanding, you tripped up in your new shoes, it's going to be okay. That's what the left-hand brain does. Does that make sense? It helps to regulate our emotions, yeah? So we talk about that capacity for the left and the right brain to work together. We talk about it as a window of tolerance, okay? And all of this, there's a picture of the window of tolerance in that document that I sent through to Jess. So don't worry if you're worried about getting all this down. It is all written down in that document. So we have our window of tolerance, and it is normal in the course of a day to go up and down inside our window of tolerance, okay? And what I was saying earlier about well-being, changing the parameters of well-being, our parameters of our window of tolerance has had to move because of the pandemic. So where normal might be here and our emotions might wobble up and down within this sort of amount, because of the pandemic, we've had to widen our parameters of our window of tolerance. And what I mean by a window of tolerance, it's our capacity to cope with emotion, to cope with life, okay? So we go up and down. We want to go up and down, right? If we emotionally flatlining in any medical terms is not a good thing, right? What does it mean if we flatline physically?
You're dead.
You're dead. So we don't want to be emotionally dead, right? We want to have emotional highs and lows. That's normal. What's not okay is when we go out of our window of tolerance, okay? Now, when I'm talking to children or schools, often the other analogy I use for that window of tolerance is a snow globe. Okay, we think about a snow globe. I'm just going to grab my snow globe. It's right here. Bear with me 1 minute. I should have got it. It's right here, but it's in one of those very annoying polystyrene boxes, and I can't bear the noise, so forgive me. Here she is. This is my snow globe. So the same idea as coping with emotions by being within our window of tolerance, it's a bit like thinking about our brain is like a snow globe, okay? And here we are sat in the middle of this snow globe. When we're within our window of tolerance, our snow is all nicely settled, yeah? When I shake this up, okay, can you see how messy and confused that is? Now, if you were trying to get an instruction about life in between all those snowflakes whilst they're furling around, you can see how difficult that would be. You've got to dodge in between all the snowflakes, yeah? But if we let the snow settle, we've still got the same capacity in our brain, but we're not doing battle with the snowflakes. That's the same concept as staying within our window of tolerance, okay? If we stay within our window of tolerance, we're using our brain in the normal way. We're accessing our normal functioning thinking brain, yeah? We go out of our window of tolerance, the snow is swirling, okay? That's when we start to struggle with our mental health, okay? What happens when we go out of our window of tolerance? We can go out that way or we can go out downwards. We go out of our window of tolerance, we resort to our what we call our sort of trauma response to life. So tucked inside the brain, that sort of bit in the middle here, is our emotional brain, okay? It's called the limbic system. Doesn't matter that you remember or know that, okay? Right in the middle of the limbic system is the bit called the amygdala, okay? The amygdala is a bit like a smoke alarm for our body, ourselves, okay? When the amygdala senses that something's not right for us in our world, it triggers our stress response. It sends us out of our window of tolerance, okay? Now, it's supposed to do that, okay? Because that's its way of keeping us safe, all right? So if you step out of the road, onto the road, and you sense a car coming at you, your amygdala will kick in straight away and cause you to jump back, yeah? It will give you a stress response. There are 3 things that happen when we have a stress response. Can anybody think what they might be? They all begin with F.
Fight and flight.
Yes, brilliant. Well done.
I don't know what the fear. Would it be
Not quite, but fight or flight, absolutely. Fight, flight, and fear is not far off it. Think about one thing we might do when we are fearful. If we're not flying away, we're not fighting to get out of a situation, what else might we do?
Freeze.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So fight, flight, freeze. When we go out of our window of tolerance, when our snow is swirling, however you prefer to think about it, okay, our emotional brain kicks in, okay, the limbic system, the amygdala, and we will stop thinking, we will stop using our thinking brain. We will just use our emotional brain. And our emotional brain will make us either fight, fly, or freeze. Now, we're not processing that thought because we're not using our left-hand brain, okay? We're not planning and strategizing and working out whether we should do plan A or plan B, because if you're in a burning building, you stand there thinking, now then, let me just use my working memory and remember what I was taught when I was, I don't know, 10 at school to do in a fire situation. Now then, do you have to stand up? Do you have to stick your head out the window? Do you lie on the floor? Oh, I'm not sure. Was there a plan A or a plan B about where you go? I can't actually. You go through all of that normal thinking process. What's happened to you in a burning building? You're dead, right? You're burned already. So the brain and the body, very clever, the emotional brain kicks in, stops us getting cluttered with all of that thinking and planning, and it makes us fight, fly, or freeze. We don't process it, we don't think about it, we respond from our gut, okay? It's supposed to be there to keep us safe, and most of the time in life it does keep us safe, yeah? Where we start to struggle with our mental health difficulty is when we are with our mental health is when we are operating very, very close to the edges of our window of tolerance a lot of the time, and potentially tripping out. And we don't have to trip out a long way, we can just trip out. And I think, Amy, that's perhaps what you were saying earlier about, you know, where life is at the moment. We are, as I said, having to expand our window of tolerance, but notwithstanding that, a lot of us are still operating right on the edges of our window of tolerance, yeah? We're feeling the pressures, and therefore we are going to start feeling the need to, or not even feeling the need, we're going to start feeling those fight, flight, freeze responses, okay? What happens when the amygdala kicks off, that limbic system, our emotional brain, it sends adrenaline and cortisol coursing through our bodies and our brains to put us in a position to fight, to fly, run away, or just to curl up and freeze. And we will all respond differently. Some of us will get really angry and really intolerant, yeah, and just kick the cat, essentially. Some of us will just not be able to engage in stuff and start to withdraw more and more and more, yeah? Some of us will sort of not be able to really properly concentrate and engage on stuff and fight, you know, that flight, just try to get away from the situation, put your head in the sand, ignore it's happening. We all respond differently, but what we're responding from is our stress response rather than our left brain thought response, processed, logical response, coping and helping to regulate those emotions, bring us back in our window of tolerance. Does that make sense, folks? Have I charged right through that really quickly, or is that making some sense?
That's making sense. Yeah.
It is making
it's
sense.
making sense.
Yeah.
I'm liking the visual diagrams of like the snow globe and stuff.
Yeah. So here's my snow globe. It's settled down now. So this is our brain in the window of tolerance. Can you see? There's all of this brain capacity to cope with thinking about what's going on in the world. How am I going to respond to it? What might be the best thing to do? Let me consider, you know, the government's advice on this. What do I actually think about it? Our brain is clear because it's operating left and right normally. We get a right brain stimulus, the government comes out with something and we go, oh, well, what does that mean to me? And in comes our left brain going, okay, well, let's just process that. Let's think about that. What does that mean to me? Okay. When we're operating at the edges of our window of tolerance, we are not in the same position to have that right left brain dialogue. We're right at the edges of our window, so we are going to have a fight, flight, freeze response. Suddenly our brain is completely cluttered, and that's what it can feel like sometimes. I can't think straight. Yeah, very emotional, very cluttered. So, you know, think about, you know, earlier in the year we had those dreadful storms. Do you remember? And not for very long, but we had some really bad storms, and just bunkering down and just trying to think about, I've got to just get home. How am I going to get home? You weren't thinking about all these long-term things. You were just coping with the immediacy of the situation. And that is where most of us are all the time. We've got this unseen threat that could wipe us out, or our families, at any time, right? All of us. That is how society is living at the moment. We are all somewhere close to the edge of our window of tolerance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're all living in a society where society is doing this. Yeah? So of course, we're going to feel stressed. Of course, we are going to be more likely to be doing and feeling fight, flight, freeze type behaviours. And we will all do it differently. Yeah? For people who are already struggling with their mental health, the things that they would normally do to help, they're doing more of. So whether that's drinking too much, or for some people self-harming, or, you know, people with eating disorders, either eating more, eating less, we go to those fight, flight, freeze responses more. And for those of us who aren't already doing those sorts of things, we probably are finding we're more grumpy, we're more snappy, or we're withdrawing emotionally from community. Yeah? Fight, flight, freeze. That's what we're going to do when we feel we're on the edge of our window of tolerance, when we feel we're not able to control, regulate our world, and our emotional response to our world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what I go on to say in this paper is one of the best things to do, and I know this sounds really like but it is so much easier to stay mentally well, even though that needs effort and energy, but it is so much easier to stay mentally well than to get to normal from being mentally sort of unwell, struggling with our mental health. So the more we can do to help ourselves stay within our window of tolerance, the better it is for us. Okay, now that, like I say, that sounds really but that is a sort of basic message of mental well-being. So it's not dissimilar to physical well-being. If we don't eat well and look after our bodies, they are going to struggle, right? And it's the same thing with our mental health. So what do we need to stay mentally well? What sorts of things do we need to stay mentally well, okay? And I put on the inside pages of this document a few ideas. So one of them is going to be, just like our bodies, eating well, okay? You'll see on the document, when you find it or print it out, I put some links to I think it's for the charity Mind, who've got a great some great advice about the sorts of foods that we can eat to help keep our brain. It's a bodily organ, so look after it. Just as an aside, I do this all the time, sorry. Just as an aside, do we know how the brain works? What constitutes how the brain works? Do we know or not?
Not very well.
Not very well. What's the brain make? What is it called? That cell in the brain that makes the brain work? Anybody know? What?
You get endorphins.
Endorphins are part of the feel-good chemicals that come out of the brain. What's the brain made up of, though? They begin with N.
Oh, neurons.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Neurons. Do you know? Does anybody know how many we've got neurons in our brain?
A lot.
Go on, give us a guess.
About 10 million.
10 million? Tim, from Tim, any more guesses?
Thousands.
Sorry, what was that one?
Thousands.
Thousands, and I think there's
thousands.
80 billion.
80
Trillion.
what? So who's that?
80 billion.
Yes, whoever that was, 86 billion. Who was that? Hello. Well, I've got you down as Beth, but I don't think you're Beth. So yes, 86 billion. Well done, Beth. 86 billion. Do you know what that's comparable to? 86 billion. So try and picture it. It's the number of stars that we have in the Milky Way.
Oh.
We have neurons in our brain, each and every one of us. A neuron works. Now, here comes my lovely visual aid. You'll love these. Here you go. Little did you know. Here it is. Here is a neuron. We have 86 billion of these thereabouts in our brain, okay? The bore is, okay, that a neuron on its own is pretty useless, all right? Neurons to work. Beth, can you unmute and tell us, how do they work? Do you know? Not Beth, it's whoever's with Beth. Do you know how they work, neurons?
Transmitters.
Yeah, go on.
Neurotransmitters.
Neurotransmitters, they do. They work by connecting. They work by connecting. Can you see?
Mm.
If we've got 86 billion neurons, how many connections do you think we have in a normal working brain?
86 billion.
So Tim says 86 billion.
43 billion.
Sorry, Amy, how many?
43 billion, because if you're connecting, then yeah.
Yeah, but that's a very educated guess. It's not the right answer, but it's a very good guess. Any more?
I'm just going to say a lot.
Nicola and Ben have gone for the a lot option. They've got 1 million billion. Yeah, a million, that's one with 14 zeros after it. That's how many neuronal connections between the neurons we have going on in our brain at any one time in a normal brain. It's a lot, eh? So we have to look after it. It's a very complex organ, right? If we don't eat properly, we're not going to look after the cells, the neurons in our brain. It's as simple as that, folks. So eating well is hugely important to maintain our mental wellness. The next thing, another obvious one, what am I going to say?
Exercise.
Exercise, thank you. Exercise is hugely important. Tim, was it you who said endorphins?
Endorphins, yeah.
Endorphins, yeah. When we exercise, we distribute endorphins, and endorphins are happy hormones. Okay, they just do help us feel well. So it's a kind of no-brainer. We don't have to become marathon runners, but we will do ourselves a big favor if, even when we don't feel like it, we get up and we go out. Okay, just walk around. Vitamin D, again, feeds those cells in our brain. If we don't get some sunlight, we are not helping those brain cells to function. Okay, it's really sort of it's common sense in many ways. Okay, what the problem often we have is that when we're on the edge of our window of tolerance, remember, what was this one down here? Fight or flight was here. What was this one? Can you remember? Freeze. When we freeze, do we feel like going out and communicating and having a bit of fun? No. That's the problem. That's why staying mentally well, or maintaining mental wellness, is so important, because once we're out here, we're fighting an uphill struggle. We're already thinking, I don't want to communicate, I want to freeze, I want to hide. Right when, to get better, we need to not freeze, we need to not hide. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So exercise, another great one. One more that kind of goes with exercise. It's a real common sense one.
Sleep.
Yes, thank you. Sleep. Yeah. Again, you know, it's so easy in the current circumstances to have no routine, no proper bedtime, no, you know, what does it matter? I'm not getting up for work tomorrow, blah, that sort of thing. It's very easy to fall into those sort of going to bed late, getting up late habits. And that's not good for our sleep and our sleep routine. Having a sleep routine is really important. So again, I've covered it in there. I've linked to apps that will help you sleep, because I have to say I struggle with sleep. So, you know, I'm always looking for something to help me. Me personally, I find, you know, I'm 52 for goodness sake, but I still find a bedtime routine really helpful. So for me, I really have to have a bath about 10 minutes sometimes, if that's all I can manage, more if I've got the time. But psychologically, I've practiced it so many times that my brain and my body know when I hit the bath, it's going to bed. So it psychologically starts to slow down all of those processes in my brain and my body that start to move me into sleep. So that's my routine. I have my bath, I read my book for a little, literally, because sometimes it's 2 pages of something, because, you know, I'm heading to sleep, and I sleep better now. It's not to say I sleep great. What we were saying earlier, things are abnormal. So the fact that I'm not getting a full night's sleep like I might do under normal circumstances, that's okay. Am I getting enough? Yeah, just about. But keeping a hold of those routines that help us hit sleep are just basic good practice to look after our mental health. Okay. I think I've just got 5 more minutes, and then I'll open it up to any more questions. There are 3 other things that are slightly less on the sort of practical side, more on the emotional side, that we can do to look after our mental health. Okay. First one is connection. Again, think about your window of tolerance. When you're down here, and even if you're at fight or flight, if you're fighting a lot, arguing, being a bit bullshit, just grumpy and biting everybody's head off, people are going to distance themselves from you. So, it's about trying to keep on top of this stuff before it gets on top of you, if that makes sense. Connecting is absolutely key to human survival. We are not an isolated species. We're born to live in community with one another. This lockdown has been hugely, hugely impactful on that sense of connection that we need, not just to thrive, but to survive. You think of a baby giraffe. Within you know, a few minutes of being born, it can stand on its own 2 feet and eat. It can survive in isolation. It might not survive for long, right? Because it's pretty vulnerable. It might get eaten by a lion or something, but it can survive. Think about a human baby. How long can a human baby survive if it got abandoned at birth? Not very long. Not very long. Yeah. We're born to connect. If we don't connect, we die essentially. Yeah. And obviously, as we've got older, we don't die when we can't connect, because we can go out and feed ourselves and, you know, do all of that practical stuff. But emotionally, it's key to us feeling mentally well. So connecting is really important. This sort of thing for you guys, hugely important. Again, though, I'm going to remind you, when you're at the edges of your window of tolerance, if you're fighting and flying a lot, you're going to feel more isolated. And if you're freezing, coming out your window of tolerance at the bottom, you're going to feel less like you want to socially connect. Yeah, so try and keep on top of that before you go out of your window and it becomes so much more difficult to connect. Okay. One of the things that I've said on here that I think is really helpful for all of these things that are less obvious than eating, sleeping, exercising, is to have a list, literally a tick list. In circumstances like this, I think it's really helpful to have a tick list. Tick list for the practical, but tick list for the emotional as well. Have I connected? And also not just a tick list, but a strategy list as well. Have a I know I will connect. I know because I've scheduled in a call, a meet, a socially isolated, socially distanced walk, right? So it's not just kind of something I'm going to do and I will, oh no, I will do it. Have it there, because that slippery slope of emotional well-being, if we're here, right here at the bottom of our window of tolerance, right, it's so difficult to pick up the phone or to get onto Zoom and make that connection. If you've already got that connection and somebody comes into your world to make that connection, they will pull you up out of that being on that edge of the bottom of your window of tolerance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't wait. My point is, don't wait sort of inactively for connection. Part of staying mentally well under these sorts of circumstances is proactively doing something about staying well. Have a tick list, have a schedule so that it happens. The other thing, as well as connection, that's very important to us as human beings to be emotionally well is a sense of autonomy. Again, very difficult when we're essentially doing what our government is telling us to do. We're not being autonomous beings, are we? So finding a way of being autonomous is very important. Even if it's things like choosing what you're going to have for your lunch, choosing where to go for your walk. I don't know, just some form of choice. I am me, and despite lockdown, within the confines of lockdown, I'm going to find a way of making a choice that works for me. Does that make sense, folks?
Yeah.
What does autonomous mean?
Autonomy means taking ownership for me. Sorry, I should have explained that. Yeah, it means, so I put in the document, autonomy is the capacity to make our own choices. It's about, I'm me, and because I'm me, I'm going to do this. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that Amy who asked that question?
Yeah.
Yeah, does that help, Amy, or not?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Elizabeth, can I just make an observation?
Yeah.
Like, this is Beth. Actually,
Oh, hello, Beth.
What I've always found helpful is the distinction between what's within my control and what isn't.
Absolutely.
So the virus, what the government's doing, is not within our control. So when we recognise it, then that's off our to-do list.
Yeah.
And the only thing that is we do have control over how we respond.
Yeah.
And you think about, well, this is happening to everybody, but individuals are having an individual response. So some people are okay with it, other people are petrified, some people are angry, and that's all okay. But it's recognizing that you do have some control over how you respond to it. And just that simple definition, and I apply that to every aspect of life. What's within my control and what isn't.
So I think he's fantastic guy. I love reading his stuff. A chap called Matthew Syed. Have you come across him?
Yeah.
He's brilliant. I love him. He was a big table tennis player. An Olympic table tennis player, and now he helps to advise a lot of people who are elite athletes. And his whole thing, just what you're saying, Beth, is exactly that. His phrase is control the controllables. So within elite athletes training, you can't control your opposition, you can't control the weather, you can't control, the state of the track. If you're an athlete, running athlete, you can't control all of those things. What you can control is your diet, your sleep, your training program. You can control whatever impacts you. And taking control, you're absolutely right, Beth, thank you. Taking control of what you can control feeds into your sense of autonomy, feeds into your sense of I'm me and I'm taking control of what I can take control of for my well-being. Does that make sense? Yeah. So
you can control your food, your lifestyle, your sleep, and
you can't control the pandemic. You can't. So stressing about that, worrying about the impact, all of that, you actually can't. We can't control it. All we can control is how we respond to that. And our response is, I know that I'm going to do what I can to stay within my window of tolerance. I know that I'm going to take control of my food, my sleep, my exercise, my capacity to meet up with other people, my sense that when I get low in my window of tolerance or I get high out here where I'm feeling my anxiety levels, I need to do something about that. Yeah, that we can control. But we can't control all of that stuff out there in terms of the pandemic. Does that help, Amy, or not?
Yeah.
So the last thing sort of emotionally that helps us take control is a sense of competence. And again, in the current climate, for many of us, we're not at work anymore. That sense of well done, we're not getting. That sense of I've achieved something, we're not getting. So again, for me, honestly, I get a sense of competence out of getting through the day. And I say to myself when I get into bed every day, well done me. I got through this, another day in lockdown, well done me. And I actively notice that I'm being competent by looking after my well-being, doing what I can to control the controllables and taking care of myself. And I've got through another day of lockdown. Well done me. Give myself a pat on the back. There will be other things you can do. For some of you, you are still working, or you've taken up hobbies, or you're helping out with the community or whatever. There will be other things. But the point I want to stress is notice your competence. Don't just assume it. You think about it. Be your own sort of best friend. How lovely it is when somebody does notice that you've done something and says, thanks so much for doing that, Nicola. That was great. I'm really grateful. Thank you. We think, oh, thank you. If we're not in a situation where anybody's going to be able to do that for us, we've got to do it for ourselves. And we've got to be our own best friend and say, I got through this. Blooming heck, well done me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the very last page of the document that I've sent through to you, I've done I've done a list of various things to think about. The very top one, Beth, is focus on the things you can control. So I'll just read through them really quickly, and then I'll leave it up to you if you've got any more questions. So focus on control the controllables. Acknowledge your fears. Okay, don't pretend they're not there, they're there. All right, you're there. We're all doing this, so just go there. I'm feeling really stressed. If you can, get on the phone to somebody. If you're not in community with somebody, if you live on your own, talk to somebody about those fears. A problem shared is a problem halved. It really does help. There is a lot of debate in the therapeutic community around which is the best form of therapy. Fundamentally, what works is communication. Why does it work? Because we get that connection. It doesn't matter whether we do that by CBT or psychodynamic or whatever else, or DBT, whatever else is out there. What works is to share that feeling, that worry, that anxiety, that stress. So don't bury it, talk about it. One of the things that I often recommend to people, if you feel that you're getting a lot of worry and anxiety, one of the ways to control it can be something as simple as like a worry box or a worry journal. So you put it down on a piece of paper, pop it in the box, or write it down on your journal, close the journal, okay? And then have a slot in your week. It might need to be daily, given this current situation. You know, there's a lot of worry, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Might be every week, when you go to your worry box or you go to your worry journal. So you're not dismissing those fears and worries and anxieties, but you're not letting them overwhelm your day, okay? And then you sit down with somebody in a cup of tea and you go, right, I'm just going to go through my worries. And honestly, if you do it weekly, you'll go through them and you'll see that actually a proportion of them aren't worries anymore. They've actually gone. Some of them will still be there. Your worries about your job or your worries about the pandemic, of course they're going to still be there. You talk those through, okay? But it's one way. Having a worry box or a worry journal can be one way of just boundarying. That's not a word, by the way, but I use it all the time. Of putting a boundary around our worries so that they don't dominate our day, who we are and how we live our lives. Try to create a routine, but don't be too hard on yourself. Try to create a time to connect, be active, get some sunlight, all those things I've talked about. Think about what works for you. So we're all individuals. You know, like I say, for me, my bedtime routine, my way of relaxing is to sit in my bath and have my chamomile tea and just to not listen to anything or anyone. That's my way, okay? And sometimes I need to just take a walk and not listen to anyone or anything. That's my way of just having my shut down. Some people will need just the opposite. Just spend a little bit of time. What's my way of just connecting, relaxing, taking a big deep breath? What works for me? And factor it in so that when you know, if you're going to work and you know your stress levels are high, no, for me, when I know I've got a busy day and I'm like, I sometimes pause and think, honestly, I've got my bath. I just need to get to my bath by supper time, and I'm juggling, and I'm thinking, I can't get to my bath quickly enough. I know in myself I've got that space waiting for me. And for me personally, psychologically, I find that helpful. I think this was one of the questions. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the COVID situation, turn the telly off, turn the radio off. The news is not going to change by you keep listening to it. It will still be there. But if you know that you're at the edge of your window of tolerance and it's causing you to feel those feelings of anxiety, which is what we feel when we're up here, fight, flight feelings, anxiety, worry, panic, yeah? Turn it off. Do yourself a favor. Look after you proactively. Look after your well-being. I'm heading towards the edge of my window of tolerance. I can see I'm giving fight, flight, freeze behavior. Get back. Do yourself a favor, get yourself back in your window, comfortably inside your window. Allow your snow to settle. Yeah, if you can feel it starting to swirl, it's all getting a bit too much, turn the telly off.
What about stopping yourself from like comparing yourself to people?
Yeah, it's all the same thing. if you find that by doing that behaviour, Amy, causes you to get to the edge of your window of tolerance, don't do it. If you ate broccoli and it made you feel sick, would you carry on eating broccoli?
No.
No, same thing. If you find that comparing yourself to other people is something that stresses you out, you know, if it helps tell people on social media, actually I find it really hard not to compare myself, I'm ducking out of social media. A lot of people are doing that on Twitter these days. They're actually actively saying, I'm sorry, but the abuse or, you know, whatever, the bombardment that I'm getting on Twitter is too much for me. I'm just ducking out of social media for a while now. It might be that you just duck out. It might be that you find it helpful just to explain to people, do you know what, actually, in order to feel I'm a bit stressed with all that's going on in the pandemic. I'm finding I can't be on social media just at the moment. I'll be back, guys, when, you know, things have calmed down. That might be enough to say that. But feeding the things that you know make you feel not great, that push you to the edge of your window of tolerance, that cause your snow to swirl, don't go there. Whether it's during the pandemic or outside of the pandemic, all of these principles apply. Yeah. And then the last thing was try to get some good sleep and look after yourself. The very bottom thing I talk about is grounding techniques. So when we are finding we're right at that top edge of our window of tolerance, we're getting really stressed. So in order to, we've got our right brain going off mad. Oh, it's all, you know, stressful. In order to try and bring our left brain online and make that connection between the left and the right, so that the left brain regulates the right brain. Remember, the left brain is logic, reason, anything that's sort of solid and practical. So doing something solid and practical really helps. So it's as simple as, I'm feeling really anxious. Taking, I know people talk about this and we think, well, it really, there is a lot of science behind it, but taking really deep breaths and expelling a lot of that anxious stress build up inside of us, and at the same time, literally sometimes maybe tapping a desk or pressing down on a desk whilst we're doing that, pressing against a wall, pressing your back against a wall, physically feeling solid, the solidity of a wall, the solidity of a bench or a table. It's what we call grounding. And it's really, really good to bring our stress levels, our window of tolerance in, keep us within our window of tolerance to settle the snow and you start to feel it swirling. So that's all in that document, most of it. So I hope that's helped. I'm sorry, I've left us about 2 minutes for questions, but please do go ahead and ask.
I think the news can be quite negative anyway, regardless of this pandemic. So I think even if people are stuck indoors, you know, you tend to go on social media quite a lot, especially nowadays, because you can't really go out to a lot of places and see your friends and stuff. So I think it's useful to obviously keep up to date with BBC News and whatever, but also to, you know, have a good well-being and try and avoid it as much as you can at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we are so pressured these days to feel we can never get away from all of that stuff. You know, when I was a little girl, I was really badly bullied when I was at school, but I could walk eventually, get away from school, certainly the school holidays. I didn't have to be bullied. I didn't have to see these people. With social media these days, you can never get away from it. No. We're constantly on demand. And I'm a massive advocate. I'm not anti-social media or anything like that. I'm just saying we need to look after ourselves and do what works for me.
It's so easy to be negative on social media. You can just type anything, you know, it's free, you can do whatever, and it's just there. So
and we hear it, and we, you know, one thing that I didn't talk about, and forgive me, is resilience. And that's another way of looking after our mental well-being, is to build a sense of resilience. Resilience I think about as being the ability to bounce back and the ability to keep going. Now there's learning around the things that we can do to build resilience, but never was there a better time to build resilience and notice in ourselves. God, look, that's what I was saying about patting ourselves on the back at the end of every day. Look at me, well done me. This has been really hard today. It was not an easy day. This lockdown has been really tough, but guess what? I've done 8 weeks of it. Well done me. Build that sense of resilience. We're being, all of us, pushed to the very extremes of what we can and should be doing, mentally and physically and emotionally. We're doing it. Look at, we're all here Saturday morning. You're all still here, finding ways to stay mentally and emotionally well. Well done, you know, well done.
One of the ways that I've been finding that I've been really building my confidence is by baking bread at home.
Brilliant.
Yesterday's didn't turn out quite as well, but the last week's really did.
Yeah,
and
so
that's been really helpful and steady and grounding, and also using spelt bread and putting seeds into the bread, so I'm getting proper nice.
Yeah.
I know we haven't got very much time. I wasn't going to come along because I'm like your age. Would it be possible for me to send an email to the person that organised this and talk to you at another time? Would that be okay?
You mean me, Liz?
Yeah.
A question to me, Liz. By all means, any one of you, if you want to just drop in, if there's, you know, if I can help, I will. I can't promise. You know, I'm afraid I'm not, you know, I don't have all the answers. I really don't. But if there is anything I can add, I will, you know, or anything I can point you towards, I'm happy to do that.
Thank
so
you.
yeah, please do. I'm sorry, your name hasn't come up, so I don't know who.
Vanita.
Okay. Yeah.
And I wanted to say to Amy as well, that thing about controlling the controllables, not to worry too much about the job market, but what you can do is focus on how well you're doing your job and maintaining good communication around that.
Yeah. So if you think about Vanita's baking bread, you know, it's ticking so many boxes there in terms of her healthy food, in terms of her sense of competence, her sense of autonomy. She's choosing to bake bread. She's taking some control. All of those things are, without her realizing it, feeding into her maintaining her well-being. And it's about, Vanita, well done, noticing that that's what you're doing. You're not just baking bread, you're proactively looking after your mental and emotional well-being. And that's my point, is, you know, actively notice this stuff, guys. Actively notice. Here you are, like I say, doing your best in these dreadful circumstances to learn and resource yourselves to stay mentally and emotionally well. That in itself is looking after your mental emotional well-being. Any more for any more?
I've sort of got a question. I've spent 8 weeks in lockdown, but the first 3 weeks I found it really hard mentally. My boss put me on furlong, and I'm also self-employed as a sound engineer, so I basically lost all my summer festival work.
Yeah.
And it got me really down.
Yeah.
And I had a 10K that was booked in London on the 5th of July, and that got cancelled. But I was still optimistic about it happening.
Yeah.
But I've just got to wait till next year now.
Yeah.
And I possibly won't get any live sound work till September.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to keep in a routine. I got a job working as a delivery driver, so
well done. See, there
I'm
you
sort
go.
of trying to help.
Brilliant, Tim. You know, there was an obstacle, there was a challenge. You could have just collapsed in a heap, but look at you. You know, you've resourced yourself to get another job. Well, you know, don't just say, oh, I got a job. No, look at me, check me, Tim. You know, I could have gone down, but I didn't. I resourced myself. I got myself another job. Whoop, whoop. Well done me, you know. I could have done, I wanted to do that 10K. Guess what? I'm going to keep running around the streets, and I'll I'll do weights instead, and I'll do the 10K next year. It's about noticing, Tim, that you are being proactive about staying what it's really hard losing your job, being furloughed, all of that. Of course it's going to get you down. That's what I mean about being on the edges of your window. Of course we're going to be, those sorts of things, of course they're going to knock your well-being, but you've picked yourself up, dusted yourself down, and found a way of sorting it out and resourcing yourself. Brilliant. Really well done, Tim.
I think it's important as well just to keep some sort of routine as you would before this pandemic as well, as much as possible. So
even with me as well, like for the last couple of weeks, like I've been quite active just trying to make sure I have some type of like routine going on. The only thing is recently, like I've noticed I've been like struggling to actually get up and like go outside for a walk, and for me it's just like I'm so used to being able to go places and interact with people, and now it's like less people are doing video chats. So having like a meeting like on Zoom and stuff, it kind of gives a bit more comfort, like there's other people also struggling and like going through the same things. But it's just sometimes like how do you change your mentality when you wake up and just be like, you know what, regardless of like what's going on, just like get up and do stuff.
It is really hard, Aisha, and that's where I'm saying, you're sensing that you're on the edges of your window here, that and that's where I think having that schedule with things that you've lined up before you go out of your window, when it's so much harder to be doing those sorts of things. So I hear you that it's drying up in terms of people that you can connect with, but whilst you've still got it in a sense, proactively line up, maybe even talking to some of these guys now and saying, look guys, I am struggling here, talk about it. Don't be frightened of the fact that you're finding it harder. Many people will. I remember one of the most bizarre expressions, I don't know if any of you have got kids, one of the most bizarre times I found was when I had young children, and everybody's like, oh, I was actually really lonely. I mean, I loved having kids, don't get me wrong, I loved it, but I found it very lonely. Because I was a professional woman beforehand, and then here I was talking about sort of poo and puke all the time, and I found it a bit, I found it really lonely, and nobody talked about it until afterwards. And then they all went, oh yeah, no, I found it really lonely. And I was like, why do you say? And then I thought, well, why didn't I say? Guys, so in the end I set up a book club just because it was my only, I could get the kids into bed once every month or something and just meet like-minded people. We talked about books, that's all that we had in common, but it wasn't poo and puke, it wasn't babies, and it was about me proactively, not waiting for somebody to come to me and say, oh Liz, are you being lonely, come on, let me help you. It's about me going, no, before I got to that freeze position of I don't really want to do anything because I'm out my window, I'm disconnected, going, anybody out there wants to join a book club, and before I knew it, there was like 10 of us meeting once a month, but I knew I had that. It's about proactive, Aisha, before you feel that, I haven't got it, to create that connection, making sure you've got that connection somehow. And it might be different to how you would normally connect. It might not be with the same people, it might be, something slightly different, but trying to find that there's all sorts of things on like the Friday night parties and all sorts of things like that, apparently, that you can just log into. I don't know, but maybe doing a bit of a Google to see if there are communities out there of people who are just wanting to connect, because you honestly will not be the only person.
Thank you,
good luck.
Thank you.
But you've done 8 weeks, You've done 8 weeks.
8 weeks, well
done. Gone by quickly.
I think time's going pretty quickly as well, even though we're stuck indoors. I think time's also, it's going fast. So that's a positive, I suppose.
I've got a question. I know we're running out of time. If you feel like you need to go, please feel free to go. But I have a question: is how would you like mentally prepare for going back to I guess like normal, so being
Yeah.
able to go back onto public transport if you haven't been on transport for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's a massive one actually, Jess, because and I do think it's a very subjective thing. I think that all we can do in terms of controlling the controllables there is follow the advice, which is masks and hand gels, washing our, making sure we wash our hands. Honestly, it's perhaps easy for me to say this, but I think, if it really is something that would tip you out of your window, then I think it's worth having that discussion with your employer or whomever, and just saying, look, can I come in late because I'm going to walk to work, I'm going to cycle to work and it will take me a lot longer, or I'm really uncomfortable about using public transport at this stage, can I come in later after the mass crowds of people or something. So not being frightened to acknowledge that fear to yourself and to your employer. But I think in terms of managing one's own anxiety levels, it is about controlling the controllables, which is following the advice of masks, gloves, hand gel. Does that answer it, or not really?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Control the controllables always is going to be a good principle by which to stay within our window of tolerance. Window of tolerance. You're going to go to bed thinking window of tolerance is no globes, aren't you? and neurons. Who knew? Any more for any more folks? I'm very sorry I've kept you. I do have a capacity to ramble. I'm so sorry.
It's just something that was touched on earlier. Someone touched on it earlier. A lot of people with dyspraxia tend to get bullied in the workplace. It's going to be quite stressful, especially now. How do we support those people and also hold their managers and supervisors to account?
Are there any what? Sorry, Kendrick, I missed a bit of that. My phone's going off, sorry.
Yeah. A lot of dyspraxic people tend to be bullied in the workplace, which is obviously going to be quite stressful, especially now. Yeah. How do we support those people and hold their managers and supervisors to account?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Look, honestly, I don't think it's any different to what one would normally do, if I'm honest. I mean, you're absolutely right. I'm afraid people are going to be making the most of this situation and using things like, excuse what they perhaps couldn't normally get away with. They will sort of use it as an excuse to get away with it now, and it's not okay. It can be very difficult. I totally appreciate to stand up. Like I said, I was very badly bullied when I was at school. It's very difficult to stand up to bullies, for sure. But I think in many ways, I think the answer to that is it's no standing up to the bullies, and the response to inappropriate behaviour within the workplace is no different just because of this pandemic. Whatever you would normally do. That's going to be different according to different workplaces. That in some places there will be unions that might be appropriate, other places there will be line managers that perhaps we need to speak to. But unfortunately, I mean, I know it's not exactly related, but domestic violence is up threefold to what it would normally be, and I'm afraid those sorts of people are abusing this situation and making life extremely difficult for more vulnerable types. I'm not sure that really answered your question, Kendrick.
What about in regards to, like, as in, I'm dyspraxic as well, so like my dyspraxia is severe. It's severe. So for me in the workplace, I really struggle. But how do you like you said not to compare yourself to other people, but it's kind of hard because you've got a normal colleague that brain works properly, and you've got your issues. But I've been trying to like put strategies into place and stuff in terms of trying to overcome it. So I've tried to remain positive in terms of affirmations, guided meditations and stuff. But then it doesn't really how do you stop putting yourself down? Like, how would you say, like, how do you accept yourself? Like, as in,
Yeah, it's really hard, Amy, isn't it? And honestly, and I say this with the greatest respect, you know, you don't need dyspraxia to feel bad about yourself. Sadly, I think a lot of people have very, very low self-esteem. But I totally appreciate and I'm very respectful of the fact that something like dyspraxia can really feed into that sense of negative self-worth. I think my answer to that would be, it's a bit like, in a sense, of physical illness. If you ran to the doctor every time you got a cold, then that probably wouldn't be appropriate. If your cold really didn't go away and it started to get more and more and more ingrained, you might then think it's about time to go and talk to a professional about it. So I would say, if you're doing everything you can to manage and maintain your self-image and be robust, and it sounds like you are, then maybe if you're still feeling really deep-seated self-image issues, it might be at some point appropriate to go and talk that through with somebody professionally, so that you can really get to the bottom of where those self-image issues are coming from. But I do hear you there. That's not, you know, it's like I say, I think self-image is something that's difficult, and social media really corrodes into that. But I can appreciate that it's, you know, having something like dyspraxia can really feed into that sense of lack of self-worth quite acutely.
You know, I practice yoga, and in yoga they say not to look at the person next to you, so that you don't compare yourself to them being able to bend over perfectly or stretch perfectly. And I think that you're not comparing like for like. Like, you know, your tennis player, your professional tennis player person, if you try and hit a ball and you're mucking around with a friend, there's no way that you're playing in the same way as a professional tennis player. You don't have an orange and a banana, you can't compare. An orange is juicy, and a banana, you feel a bit thirsty afterwards, you know. So I think that just remembering that you're not comparing like for like, that you're special, you've got your own qualities, and to nurture those qualities within yourself in your own time, in your own way. I find that thinking to be helpful for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. That's great. But yeah, great.
Does anyone else have any questions, or shall we wrap up for today? And then I can let you know that the next session's on Saturday the 27th of June, and that's going to be on employability.
Can I come to that?
I'll share it with everyone.
I'll come to that.
Any more, folks? I hope I'm not sure I did necessarily answer all your questions.
No.
So forgive me if I didn't.
No,
but I
it's been
hope,
great, thank you.
I hope I covered most of what you, or at least helped a little bit to put some clarity to it all.
No, it's useful. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and what a lovely group of people to spend an hour with. It's been a really, really nice contact, really nice, pleasant.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah. Everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great chatting with you guys, and you know, I really do applaud all of you. So, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be at all patronising when I say that. I'd say that to any group of people. We're, you know, this is hard, and we're here, we're doing our best to get through it. So, and you better hear that you have that added, you know, burden, that added struggle to get over, which is your dyspraxia. But you know, you are doing each one of you in your own way. So, honestly, really well done, folks. It's been lovely. Thank you very much. And it's got me out of cleaning the house. So, yeah.
Thank you for
Thank you.
taking the time to
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Everyone for attending.
Thank
you. Bye.
Okay, cheers. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Jess. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Jess. Bye.